Hotel Arusha. And I heard the band singing, Onyango, Onyango, Onyango. I said, hey, they're singing for me. They said, So watch you, maneno. They say, don't you know every third Tanzanian is Onyango? So we are very abundant in Tanzania, we are abundant in Kenya, we are abundant in Uganda. First of all, I want to thank Kido. Is he here? Jasper? Kido? Asante sana. It was a brilliant presentation. You've helped me. When I was still a student, to earn my fees, I used to work the graveyard shift. You know the graveyard shift? That one from 12 midnight, mpaka saa mbili asubuhi. And that shift is a dangerous shift. You can't stay awake, whoever you are. And moreover, I was supposed to be an askari. So the supervisor would always come around, and I got to start listening for his footsteps to keep awake. But Jasper, you've kept us awake. Thank you very much. And I don't regret that we're doing the graveyard shift, which is the last shift of the day. Lastly, and by no means least, I think the Kenyans have apologized for not speaking Kiswahili. As a Ugandan, you must accept my sincere apologies. First of all, we had a president called Idi Amin Dada. And you know what Mwalimu said about Idi? When Idi said, Mwalimu, you're so beautiful and handsome. I would have married you, but you have gray hair. And Mwalimu's retort was, but your name is Dada. So as a Ugandan, I must apologize, because I don't know if this story originated in Uganda or somewhere else, but the story about Kiswahili is that it was born in Zanzibar. Who's from Zanzibar here? Those are the original Mwenyeji. Born in Zanzibar, nurtured in Tanzania mainland, butchered in Kenya, buried in Uganda, resurrected in Rwanda, Burundi, and DRC, which is why the Kiswahili of our neighbors on the west is much better than our Kiswahili. The only Kiswahili we know is Pandagari, Toa Viatu, and the like. So I apologize, I'm not going to speak Kiswahili ya Kiganda. Now, the way we're going to treat this session is that we're moving from the very powerful keynote that Bio gave us to move to the organic level. Those who are on the front line of the struggle for human rights in the neoliberal era. They're bringing bio down to base. They're bringing bio down to base. They want to translate bio into their organic experiences, their lived daily experiences. And I want them, as they do that, to address 3 questions. But before that, I will introduce them. You have Miss Anna Henga from the Legal and Human Rights Center, which is based here in Dar es Salaam. You have my brother, Professor Hamudi Majamba, University of Dar es Salaam. And my sister, Malvine, Thogo, I don't know whether current, former, because as they say, once a leader, always a leader, right? Willie has gone, but you know, and I'll say something about him tomorrow. Our good president, His Excellency, and dear brother Yoweri Kaguta Tibehaburwa Museveni. You know, we're told he was born a leader. He came to Dar es Salaam, he led. He came back to Uganda, he's still leading. So once a leader, always a leader, Melvin. But I want us to address basically 3 questions, organically. from their experiences. As you can see, we have a very diverse panel. Unfortunately, Mr. Khalifa Said is not with us, but I want our panelists to address three broad questions. Number one, which are these rights that we're talking about? Which are these rights that we're talking about? And I raised this question partly because Kido was saying we have the right to remain silent. We have the right to remain silent. And for me, as a constitutional lawyer, I immediately think about the criminal justice system. What is Kido saying? Kido is saying we're under detention. We're under detention. How do we break through of that detention? But what category, which rights are we talking about? Especially in this context of neoliberalism. And to address this issue, do we have the right to remain silent in the age of neoliberalism? Which, of course, entails that you address the second question from your own perspective. How has neoliberalism impacted on human rights? From your perspective, tell us, from your own experiences, as the diversity that you are there. This is actually the most diverse panel I think we've had since the morning. I'm going to say something about that tomorrow, but for now, we have a very diverse panel in terms of gender, in terms of age. So it's not just us, the wazee wa kazi, who are pontificating. How has neoliberalism impacted on the particular category of rights which you are concerned about? And the third question, which is a broad question and also goes back to what Bayo was saying, what can be done? Not only to move to a post-liberalism stage, but also to a post-rights stage, which is what Issa was talking about in the morning. How do we reinvigorate, reconceptualize, redirect, reorganize these rights away from the ritualization of democracy? Bayo told us about the question of technology. It reminded me, of course, of what His Excellency Joseph Stalin said about votes. He said it's not who counts the vote. It's not who votes, but who counts the vote. So with the technology, you're just making it better for the one who's counting the votes to rig the election. So how do we then, after you've given us that reflection, how do we re-empower the citizen? How do we de-immiserize the citizen? How do we move away? How do we move away from Kido's jail of silence? Thank you very much. So I'll start by asking Ms. Anna Henga. Please, Anna. And we're already 30 minutes later, and I know that at this point in time, we can only stretch the graveyard shift so much. So I'll give you 8 minutes. Is that okay, Anna? 8 minutes, then Hamudi 8, and then Malvine 8, and then we will get reflections, comments from the general public. Thank you very much. So Anna, start with you.
Thank you so much, moderator. Your questions are very wide and broad, but I think I have the right to remain silent in questions which I cannot respond to. But I start by thanking the organizers of this event. It's my first time to attend to this kind of an event, and it has been an honor. I've learned a lot from professors. I'm a student. I was a student of the University of Dar es Salaam 16 years ago, when Prof. Majamba was the dean of the Faculty of Law. So I feel honored to be in the same panel with my professor and professors around in the room. Thank you so much. Maybe before I proceed, I'll give you a little bit. I want. It's impossible to teach, to teach or to preach to the converted, but maybe briefly about human rights. You've mentioned about what are these rights. When we say human rights, what do we mean? In a simple term, human rights are entitlements, just entitlements. Entitlements of any human being by virtue of her or him being a human being. And these rights are there because that person is a human being. They are not made by any law. They are not made by any convention. They are not made by any policy. Yeah? In 1948, now this year is 75 years, we got the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is the first document that is documented human rights systematically. Though there were other documents like the Magna Carta and others, but at least the Universal Declaration documented the two generations very well. Though later on the generation of human rights were documented again. So there are civil and political rights. There's also socio-economic cultural rights, and there's also collective right. And human rights are universal. Why universal? Because a human being is a human being, whether is an Asian, whether is a Tanzanian, whether is a person comes from the US or wherever. So they are universal and inalienable. They are interdependent. When you deny one right, you deny another right as well. So that's it in the nutshell. Maybe to respond to some of the questions and also to react from the keynote address, I was touched by the speaker when he mentioned about election, because I'm an election observer, and I was arrested 6 years ago when I was leading my team to observe the general election of 2020. We got arrested and we were told you are counting votes, you are doing parallel votes tabulation. And we asked the policemen, what does the law say about counting votes? Is it an illegal thing? They said you go to the police station and you'll be asked what you did, and then you'll be told of your offense. When we went at the police station, we were told you've violated the Cyber Crimes Act, Section 16 of the Cyber Crimes Act, and that act was a very new act. It was enacted just a few months ago, few months before the election, and for the first time we did not see the bill as law stakeholders. We did not see the bill. It came under certificate of urgency, and even the members of parliament were not in the parliament. Well, the quorum was not met during making of the Cyber Crimes Act. So we went there. We remained in the police station, and later on we were released on bail. But our computers, our servers, and everything were taken by the police, and they remained in the police custody for 8 months. After election, after the appeals, the appeals of members of parliament, some of them appealed. After ruling on everything, the judgment and everything, and then we are told, come and pick your things. We went there and we picked our computers. So it's a challenge. I agree with the keynote address that it is technology with something else. Because we are just using technology to observe, and actually we were not counting votes, though we were getting information what is happening in Tanzania and things like those. So it was a challenge. And another group also of the main ruling party, Chadema, the group was also arrested, and those ones were released, I think after 3 months or something. So it is a challenge. Another thing which I want to mention is the denial of the right to observe. Because in 2025, not in 2020, the arrest was in 2015. In 2020, we did not observe. Why? There was no reason why we had not given accreditation. And in anyone who was associating with us in the coalition or mentioning the Legal and Human Rights Center, mentioning Henga, was not accredited. Yeah, so it was like a cancer. They are treating cancer, so that is not spread. It doesn't spread to the rest of the body. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge. So what are the rights? The rights. I want to respond to what are the rights, but those rights have been constantly being infringed in Tanzania on issues of democracy. Another thing I would mention about the freedom of expression, the basic rights, laws related to the media. In 2005, there are many laws which were enacted. The Cyber Crimes Act I'm mentioning, Access to Information Act, Electronic and Postal Communication Act, and others, Statistics Act, many others. And when you look at the laws, all of them, I think, Legal and Human Rights Center has filed cases to each of those of those laws. We only won one case challenging the Media Services Act, and it is at the East African Court of Justice, not even in Tanzania. So those laws limit participation of people, limit participation of people to freely access information. They limit journalists from freely looking for news and disseminating news and airing news. Using those laws, there are media houses which were closed down. The newspapers were banned, and things like of those kind. So that is Tanzania, and I'm sure also Kenya, Uganda, and other African countries have the same problems on the right to information and media and access to information. Another thing in Tanzania in 2006, political parties were banned from operating, especially conducting rallies, and it went on for 6 years. Only last year, I think they were allowed. This year, they were allowed after the sixth president. She formed a task force on democracy, and one of the recommendations of that task force was political rallies should be allowed, and also the new constitution making should take place. The making of the new constitution should continue because it started years ago. And another recommendation was issues of gender equality to be observed, and also issues of independence of the National Electoral Commission. So the issue of the laws, of Election Act and the Political Parties Act, I think they are in the process. We've been promised that in the coming parliamentary sessions we'll get that law, though we have not seen the bill yet, even the zero draft, but we still believe that it will happen. Political rallies have started, but it depends on what you are going to discuss. If you are going to discuss on the new constitution, it's not allowed. If you are going to discuss about Loliondo and Ngorongoro issues, it's not allowed. So it depends on what you are going to discuss, on the topic you are going to discuss. Yeah, so it's still a challenge. Constitution making process, we've been told we will have to learn the 1977 constitution for 3 years before we get a new one. So that's a challenge again, because we spent like 5 years making the new draft of the new constitution, and the new that constitution we didn't achieve, we didn't get it. Now we are taken back to the 1977 constitution for 3 years. So it's a challenge. So responding to your questions, though they're as wide as they are, for me I would say most of the laws, most of the rights are on papers, but Tanzanians are not really enjoying most of the rights. Another thing I would say, we have bad practices which are not in the laws. The law would say A, and the practice would be B, totally different from what is there. Maybe I conclude my 8 minutes. I think they're almost over. The issue of gender and the rights of marginalized groups in Tanzania. According to our report, the Human Rights Report, Tanzania Human Rights Report, the most affected group are children in Tanzania. In Tanzania, I don't know for other countries, are children. 47% of all abuses, which we documented with our sample. I'm being very careful because I'm talking to academicians. They will ask you, what is your sample size? So our sample size is 20 regions of Tanzania mainland, and 5 regions of Tanzania Zanzibar, 25 regions. So according to our sample, 47 of the abuses we've documented are against children. And it's rape, mostly sexual offenses, and it's rape and others. And those sexual offenses are committed by parents, guardians, teachers, even religious teachers. So you can imagine the problem we're facing, and we want Tanzania or Africa to be somewhere later on to develop, and we are abusing our own children. Number 2 is the violence against women, which is 33% of women which we interviewed or we came into contact. 33% have been abused. It's also rape, marital rape, and other physical abuse and others, and followed by other abuses. So maybe I end up here. But I conclude by saying we still have a long way to go in terms of human rights, and we need to improve our situation. Though we have the right to speak, but I think we need to speak more, especially the academicians and human rights activists. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anna set the pace, and she's discussed essentially about her experience in the context of human rights where she works. Joe, your questions are a little bit problematic. Yes, I'll start with the last question, which will lead me to my discussion. And your question on that last one was, how do we empower citizens? And therefore, on that perspective, I'll be a little bit general in a liberal way, okay? So which are these rights that we are talking about in the context of neoliberalism? I'll pose questions rather than also address. So the first question I'll also pose, in a neoliberal economy, in a neoliberal world, who is defining these rights? It's from whose definition? Who defines the rights? Who sets the agenda? Rights for who? For what purpose? You must query. So when you're being told about a right to education, university education, cost sharing, those issues come in. Right now, if you get outside this council chamber, there's a very big structure. We are displaying buildings that will be built by the IMF and the World Bank and the HEAT project. And it has come with conditionalities. We have to revise our curricula. All of us, we are doing curriculum review. This curriculum review, the subjects being taught, the methodology of teaching, what do you teach? Because you've been given, and this is across all universities, not in only University of Salaam, public universities. I don't know about private universities. So who defines the agenda in terms of neoliberalism in the context of what you're discussing here? If you go further, slightly on the same context, Joe, and I think I mentioned this to Kamata too, we all have our notebooks, and I will quickly request you to go through with me on the notebook, the cover page. The cover page. The cover page reads academic freedom, comma, democracy. I want you to go with me on the last one. And sustainable development. Now, we are coming to discuss rights here under Codestria. The focus is on freedom, academic freedom. I don't see any round table on sustainable development. And this is critical. We're talking about resources here. We're talking about wildlife resources. We're talking about our natural resources. Typical, and that's sustainable development. So I'll also say, in the context of neoliberalism, and that's my area, I'm focusing, my specialty, area of specialization is natural resources and environmental management law and policy. So I don't see that. So is that also an agenda that has been set in terms of what we discuss here in academic freedom? We have the right to remain silent on sustainable development. So that's the other question I'll be posing. Okay, which other rights that are being brought about by neoliberalism? Maybe how has neoliberalism impacted on human rights? Maybe I should go to that one. Again, who sets the agenda? It's impacted on the following. Number one, sovereignty. We are all struggling. States, all struggling for sovereignty. Some have gone to the extent of enacting laws to ensure that the sovereign resources of the country are not violated. Some of them draconic laws. In the context of we ourselves, we create a law and say these people cannot extract, they cannot take away the resources, and some of us, amongst ourselves, because the agenda has been set, we have CSOs, we have NGOs, we're saying this is unfair. Unfair to the multilateral corporations. Our NGOs going up in arms, saying the government is being unfair. Why can't you have the dispute settled in England, in the UK? You are going against BITs. It's we are saying that. Who set the agenda for us? Is it so that's the impact it's bringing in? We are corrupting ourselves, trying to protect resources. So sovereignty, self-determination. That's the other one. Neoliberalism has impacted on self-determination, and to a great extent, and I want to be honest about this, it has brought confusion in terms of culture. Do we in Africa have a human rights agenda? Human rights are based on a number of things, and I want us to engage in that. When you talk about culture, in the HEAT project, one of the subjects they are saying that it should be cross-cutting gender and sexual relations, sexual orientation. So I'm teaching law, and I've been told to bring in the context of human rights, I discuss about sexual orientation. I will discuss it in the cultural context. But who sets the agenda? And here I have in mind, very, very frankly, cultural impact. We have also another impact, creation of dubious, in some instances, some are credible, Big Human Rights Center, some dubious CSOs, civil society organizations, dubious NGOs, and also NGIs, non-governmental individuals. So that's what is created. Now we also have LGBTQ plus. I think there was a plus somewhere. I missed it. It's called what? Queer. Don't shy from that. That is the impact of. Yeah, we must discuss it. If you don't tell our students here at the university about it and how it's coming in through what avenues, it is becoming an internationally recognized human right. Now you go to the village in any country in Africa and go and tell the 80% people there what it entails, and then those are the people who will be speaking. What they'll tell you is what you should be empowering. And towards the end, how do you empower citizens? Joe, in Masaka, you go and talk about LGBTQ to those people there, the Baganda, the Teso. you'll come out alive. I'll be very grateful. How do we reorganize these rights? Technology, maybe, that's one. But for me, I think, get back to the cultural context. Get back to the people. Let the people speak. We are here discussing at a very high level, very, very high level. Can we break that down in the language of the people? In the context of their culture, their rights. They will determine their rights. If we, professionals, we've been to all these places, we know the instruments, etc., etc. These people were there, they don't know about their rights. That's the assumption. That's the impact of neoliberalism on the cultural context. The cultural rights defined at the international globe by people who don't have a culture. Joe, thank you. You're looking at me. My time is still me. Still there. I have 2 minutes. So the rights that I will generally say overall, right to life, that is universal. Right to food, it's universal. Finally, right to respect of each and everybody's culture in the context of that person, not in the context that has been defined and redefined by the international community. Joe, thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so finally, Melvin.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Melvin Thogo from Kenya, University of Nairobi. I'm a lawyer who's about to be crowned in a month's time from the University of Nairobi. Glad to be here, and I'm happy that I take part in such a discourse at this time and representing the age group of the young people and everyone else around me. To the first question that was asked, what are these rights that we are talking about? And I would like to look at it from a point of universality. When you're looking at neoliberalism, what are we looking at? We are looking at civil rights, political rights, economic rights, and social rights, or you can say socioeconomic rights. And this is because in a neoliberal era, what are we aiming at? What are the proponents trying to do? And what are some of the things that we want to get rid of or that we want to bring on board? And looking at deregularization, this has been talked about today. So I'm assuming we are all on the same page of this. You're talking about commercialization. You're talking about individuals who are free, rational, and who we believe that know what they're supposed to do and that the outcomes of what they want to do are right, provided they did them with good intentions. And of course, that now will again bring us back to what Prof was asking about the issue of agenda, the issue of whose rationality are you talking about? And when you look at deregularization and maybe commercialization of the spaces and the free markets that we are commonly talking about, you come to realize that the rights mostly affected will be economic and social economic rights. Because when you commercialize these spaces, when you commercialize some of these social responsibilities and rights, what are you trying to do? You're trying to create a rift. You'll be having two cities, a city of the haves and a city of the haves-nots. And so when you take away some of these things, will you still say that we are observing human rights? You're taking away dignity at some point. You're also taking away maybe the only tool that the people considered as underdogs still have, the marginalized. And so the other problem that I would have with proponents of neoliberal policies is the fact that communication of the intentions of these policies are not clear because we do not understand. you do not understand that they'll actually let you, just to hoodwink, they'll let you still vote. They'll tell you you can take part in elections, anybody can vote, universal suffrage is there, women can do this and that. But they're not telling you that when we talk about free markets, we mean that we do not want the government to tell us how much taxes they want our businesses to pay. We are saying that we do not want the government to tell us that if you're getting into the health industry, this is what we expect of you. Rather, we want to be able to tell you how much we will charge on Monday, how much this product can cost on Sunday, and what does that do to you. If we do not understand the rights that these policies will infringe, then I'm sorry, we are going to regret at a certain point when going back will be so hard. And I'm not sure we'll be talking about human rights anymore, because we'll be forced to go back to 1947 before UDHR. To go to the second question, do we have the right to remain silent in a neoliberal era? We can never remain silent in whatever era. I think we've seen what silence can do, and if you're in East Africa, it might not be the case much, but you've seen other African countries who did not speak up early enough and who were affected just because of silence. We have to speak up, not because directly it's affecting you, but because your neighbor is suffering from that. And it will spread, it will trickle down in some way. And we have to speak up. And that also goes to, I think I'll combine that with how do you empower the societies and the society and the communities around you. You have to educate them. What do we mean when you talk about a neoliberal era? What era is this? What are some of these rights that we're talking about? And what are some of the spaces and ways that you can champion for this? I like to look at Joel, who's living in a neoliberal era. Because from what I understand it, if you let me free, I understand that I should use my rational mind to make my decisions, to know that if I do this, the outcome should be right, and if I do that, the outcome should not be. And what will that do? If you do not regulate, let's, for example, use religion. If you do not regulate how I handle people from other religious groups, what we are going to do in the end, we are going to collide, because society expects me to accept them, but I also want you to understand that I am not obliged to accept your side. And it's going to create a fanatism on my side. And when we start fighting between, let's say, religion A and religion B, who are we going to credit all this for? So I think understanding these spaces, understanding the links between and among all these rights is important, even as we try to address them among the communities. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Malvine. So we really have a good, I guess, what do the Swedes call it? Smorgasbord. We got a great collection here of views, and my task here is really to marshal the comments. And you can hear there's a diversity, really, a great diversity, and from the question of the addressing all these new, what I would call post Magufuli laws. Kind of from outside of Tanzania, we thought, now that you have Mshibewa, Samia, that now things, but you're telling us a different story. Is there no difference in that sense? Hamudi, your question of culture, I'm sure there are going to be many, many responses on that issue. Question is, again, what is culture? How does it emerge? How do we discuss this question of culture? And lastly, Malvine, if we were to redesign She said, we can't go back to 1947. If we were to redesign the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, would it be the same instrument as we have? So I'm going to leave it there. I'm sure there are questions. Can I see people's hands? All right, there's a hand over there. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we have only 30 minutes. Can you pass it back? We have only 30 minutes, but we'll take some questions and then we'll get back to them. Oh, I should. Oh, where do you? Where this technology, you know? Wapi? Show me. I need to know. You're okay. I think it's permanently on. How many intellectuals does it take to switch off a microphone? Okay, so what? Okay.
Yeah.
Just introduce yourselves because we want to get to know.
Yes, my name is Budeba Petrom Liakado. I'm coming from Dar es Salaam University College of Education, IDUSE. This is part of this university. Of course, you are giving us 30 minutes.
I'm sorry. We are under the dictatorship
of time.
The organizers, under the dictatorship of time.
Okay.
But come on. What's the maximum? You have the right to speak.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate all the speakers from from morning to this time, and this for the sharing of what they have said. But let me go to this session. Of course, I have been reading, and one of the book I was told about was the Animal Farm. In that book, the first time I was just told about the story, and I found it and I read it. The Animal Farm is telling me about what is happening in our societies currently. And I picked one point which is dictating our human rights as we speak, and that is selfishness. Take everything that we are doing. If we remove selfishness, we can deal with a lot of things that can help us to provide human rights. We take our responsibility to provide human rights to anybody who deserves. But if we continue with what is in that book, selfishness, and there is one thing which is said, all humans are equal, but they are more equal than others. So if I can quote it correctly or wrongly, but that is what is said, that you might have equal people, but they are more equal, which means there are people who are selfish to the extent that they don't see if other people deserve to live or deserve to enjoy life in this world. So my question also, if we wanted to empower people, we are saying we wanted to empower people. For example, we can provide the education as it said. How do we provide that education that can empower people in the context where we are always and constantly censored? You go in the class, you have the so-called chawa in Tanzania. A lot of chawa. People are listening. What is he or she talking? Is it imposing some things which are against the ruling party or the management of whatever? If I'm working at the university, is it talking about something against the management? those are things, okay, we wanted to empower people by providing education. But if we think about the censorship and then we think of the poet, we have the right to remain silent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We are very moving into the academic freedom arena. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, all the panelists. I'm interested in the cultural and therefore linguistic dimension of development, which Professor Majamba touched on. I would like to know how you can reconcile such dimension with other forces like the HEE, is it HEET? HEAT. The HEAT project, which is funded by IMF and the World Bank, and also in the context of the Scramble for Africa, the current Scramble for Africa, as revealed between China, for example. China is taking over with its Confucius Institutes and so on. How do you reconcile this, and what is the answer to this kind of dimension which actually raises more questions than answers?
Thank you very much. Yes, madam. The lady in the red. Just let us know who you are.
Yes, good evening. My name is Tina Mfanga from the Women Cooperative and also the Tanzanian Socialist Forum. So mine is not a question, actually. It's just a brief comment on the human rights under the neoliberal era. And when I was thinking along those questions, actually, I thought of what I had just read from Vijay's foreword on Comrade Issa's book, a term which he coined, not sure whether he coined himself, the division of the international division of humanity. And when I was listening to my sister's presentation, Anna, I could actually also, in a way, think of it, which is actually the reality, that such division actually is not just at the international level, but even at the national level. So even within, there's a sense of those who are more human than others, right? Within the very same discourse of human rights. And from the mainstream perspective, it has always been, in most cases, when you speak of the rights, the freedom of expression, and the rest of the rights that so much inclined to the politicians and the middle class elites and the related. And I'm not trying to say that these are not in any way related to the poor masses, but to the large extent, there's a way the rights, or rather the substantive part of the rights that really touch the lives of the working people, of the masses, are in most cases being forgotten in such kind of discussions. And there's one example which I like to give it. You'll forgive me if you have heard it from me anyway. When the operation of the street vendors was going on, which is still going on up to now anyways, and around the very same time, there were also the continuation, of course, in a way, of the attack on the political party leaders and the related. And some of us remember one leader of the of one of the opposition parties was arrested. So at that time, there were a lot of campaigns online, free Mbowe, which is a good thing anyways. And at the very same time, there were hundreds of street vendors who were being detained in lots of cells within Dar es Salaam, and of course other cities where they're being oppressed. But you would hardly hear such in the mainstream discussions. Even the mainstream media houses, if they were to speak anything about that, it was just to educate these vendors to vacate the spaces that the government doesn't want to be. And in connection to that, I'm concluding, is the way that this human rights package in the neoliberal era comes with that disempowerment of the masses themselves. One of the colleagues spoke of educating these people to understand what we mean by rights, but literally they do understand. And I think as a process of empowering each other, let's go and learn their language, not just breaking down our language into what they understand, but learn theirs as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I just want to appreciate the chair and all four panelists, because I think Jasper has found himself as he's on the panel even though he's sitting at the back. And I say that especially also because I want to just I'm really excited that the question of culture has come into the space and it's at the forefront. And I'm really thinking about, again, this question of what does culture mean, and culture as something that evolves. It doesn't remain static, but that also different people are acting on. I was very excited when Malvine said that, you know what, in this day and time, and in this space, East Africa, you can't not speak. And I thought, wow, 10 years, 20 years ago, that was not the culture. So clearly, there's a culture that is changing that's very exciting. The reason I'm bringing up this is that when you think of Fanon talking about culture being something that's constructed in the realm of ideas, we think of Hutonji, who talks about traditions. So you've talked about what is the people's culture, but Hutonji talks about how traditions are the past sending its legacy into the future, and we in the present are mediating it. When we think about, I'm wondering, what is our challenge as intellectuals? And I don't just want to talk about academics, but academics speaking to other intellectuals, as my sister has said, there are different priorities, there are different questions, and instead of having them in separate spaces, what is our challenge of thinking about human rights as it evolves within our cultures? And cultures locally, cultures nationally. Bio brought in this idea of Pan-Africanism, but also not being afraid to say that this global culture that we're talking about that's dominated by neoliberalism, we can challenge it. So I guess I'm putting into the room, we can point fingers, and we've done that. But Bio said we have a challenge to restore our dignity, reclaim our sovereignty. How do we do that as we even deal with these questions from a cultural standpoint? Thank you.
Can I see how many other hands there are? There's one. Anybody else? Two? Three. Okay. So, okay, you've got the mic. So very quickly, just tell us who you are, and then, so then we'll have.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm Robert Kakuru from Makerere University. I'm the chairperson of Makerere University Academic Staff Association and the general secretary of the Forum for Academic Staff of Public Universities in Uganda. I want to thank the panelists and the chairperson of the panel for raising very interesting questions and responses. In the neoliberal era, I just have to put a rider, I teach human rights. And I note that in a neoliberal era, some of the human rights are for sale. In as much as we want to argue that these are fundamental freedoms, they are masked in the name of services where the state has withdrawn, and some of these services have to be paid for. We can talk about many things that we pay for that would be rights, and it's very interesting. But also, we enjoy these rights in a class-based system. We see the neoliberalism advocating for classes, where we have the affluent and we have those, the downtrodden. It's quite interesting. I had someone talking about vendors in Tanzania, and the same situation is happening to Uganda. We have the same situation of land grabbing in Uganda I've had land grabbing in Ngorongoro and the neighboring areas. And who is occasioning this? We have a class of those who have the power grabbing land and violating rights of the rights holders. We have a fissure autonomy and independence of the rights holders, while the duty bearers are growing more wings and more powers, to the extent that you come to institutions, you find that very few members of the community would want to raise an objection to a view that is raised by a number of by the bosses. Lastly, weak institutions. I think there is a deliberate move by the neoliberal era to weaken institutions, which in many ways contributes to the violations of human rights. I submit. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Muhyiddin Shangwe. I'm in the Department of Political Science here at the University of Dar es Salaam. The topic of culture always fascinates me, not because I'm an expert in culture or cultural studies, but I always find that sometimes we give it's like surrender ownership of the rights, in this case, say to the West, and in the name of saying, oh, this is not our culture, we're basically giving credit to the West for things that are values that are probably universal, and we have heard this many times, like certain practices are un-African, homosexuality is un-African, confronting your leaders and demanding answers is un-African. Sometimes our rights are being trumped on by our leaders, and when you question, this narrative comes out like this. You cannot. The modality of asking or demanding answers is un-African. So I think we need to approach this with caution, because some of the values are essentially universal values or universal rights. But again, when we discuss them, we say, oh, this is a Western value. Even when it's African value, maybe it's just because it contradicts certain interests of certain people, then we give it the ownership to the West, even though it probably, values that have universal characters. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, finally, lady at the back. Just let us know who you are.
Thank you. My name is Florence Muheirwe. I'm a PhD student from the University of Arithi. This is an interesting space to share views with people who have divergent cultural inclinations, political, socioeconomic backgrounds. Normally, the space of human rights in the spaces that I've attended, there is no agreement of what human rights are. We say they are human rights and they're universal, but when you come to debate, you really see that they are not universal, and we don't agree on what human rights are. So when human rights are not universal and we can dictate that this is not proper in certain circumstances, then they cease to focus on what I would call Ubuntu. Because if we really focus on our African perspective of Ubuntu, then we could understand what humanity is and then what human rights is. Now, what is disturbing for me is the second question. If we cannot have a common understanding of what human rights should be and how we should uphold those rights, then how are we going to empower communities to go forward if we don't have a common converging point that these are our universal rights as Africans, as East Africans, and then we need to empower communities? Because if we remain divided, then the human rights will still remain divided. And of course, the minority will continue to suffer in this space. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Okay, so we can clap for that. We're going to give the panelists 3 minutes each. Mzee Kamata will hand over the floor to you to tell us any other business that may be outstanding. So Melvin first, and we'll go down.
Thank you to the audience. The comments you've raised, we appreciate. I think we can all agree that we are together in this, and I see that the question of culture is coming up strongly. I hope with time we'll be able to sort out that, because I think we keep talking about culture, but we also don't. With the coming generations, I don't think my generation quite understands what culture in this sense also means, or maybe we just don't agree with some of them, but I hope with time we'll be able to solve that equation. Just to close, this is an interesting subject, the neoliberal policies vis-a-vis human rights, and I think we need to go back, carefully analyze, evaluate ourselves, our values, what we want for ourselves, envision the Africa that you want for yourself. Which Africa would you want to exist in? And you will get the questions as to what you want your neoliberal era to be like, because I believe no one has defined and cast in stone that this is what has to happen. We can still redefine it. And I do not believe that there is a single concept that is solely evil. We can make it work for us.
Yes, asante sana Joe. I will quickly just point out areas that I think I should chip in. Number one, Dr. Budeba do say, all human beings are equal, but some are more equal than others. Yes. We saw that we're seeing that in Gaza now. In Gaza, we're seeing that in Gaza. Nobody's making noise. The UN is there, and that is it. We saw that in COVID, the COVID crisis. In terms of addressing the crisis, we saw what happened. And that was clearly, in that respect, regulation. Professor Senkoro, thank you very much. The issue about how do you reconcile that aid to universities in terms of the contestations between, say, you gave example, China and other blocs. We've been dependent. We've been very dependent. Maybe if we could control our own resources, that would be better. So the idea is accepting conditionalities. And I'll give an example of the HEAT project, and I wish management was here. I would have discussed it very openly. This project was brought in, there was no consultation with units. No consultation at all. And they came with the agenda of some subjects and telling you now, after this, you review curricula. So curriculum review comes in with this package. There was no transparency, negotiation, and inclusivity. So if this was brought up in light, you can decide. It's not the first time we're getting aid, but this kind of aid, that at the end of the day, we will have to surrender some aspects in terms of even educating our students here. So with me, negotiate, and you have negotiating power. The problem will be then, do we have the leaders to do that for us? Can we do that? Can it be brought together out in the open, and people bring in ideas, almost all projects? Okay, and that's what I talked about, self-determination. That's universal, self-determination. Allow me, give me aid, I decide. Don't decide for me. Okay, the other point, maybe Dr. Kakuru, I can agree with you, no less. I'm seeing you bring in the aspect of sustainable development, in terms of the Ngorongoro, the land crisis, and all that. An anecdote. The funders of Ngorongoro, in terms of even the movement today, is UNESCO. They're funding the project. They brought it first, now they're saying, no. If you want to stay in the list of world cultural heritage and everything, you have to do this and this. We'll assist you, relocate these people outside. So that's part of it. So I see you sustainability in terms of land, in terms of natural resources, etc. But that is weak institutions. I can see nothing happening. My only concern, and I'll be very frank now, with the current trend, Joe and colleagues, at the universities, back in universities now, you have very little interest. Our students, I see some light somewhere. They're very few. They are dwindling. It is scary. They will not discuss. You're going to talk about neoliberalism policy and academic freedom, etc., etc. They don't know what you're saying. They are not interested. And that is a problem. This generation disappears, and then the generation coming up with the Sabatos and everybody else, we are praying for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Finally, Anna.
They are praying for us. Thank you. Not many questions were addressed to me, but I want to comment on give my comment on the animal farm. That all human beings are equal, but others are more equal than others. How do we extinguish this selfishness habit of ours? I don't know how. Maybe we invest. We invest in the future generation. Maybe. How do we invest in the future generation if the parents are already corrupted? I was reading the CAG's report because it is under discussion Controller and Auditor General. Yes, sorry, I thought Controller and Auditor General's report. The numbers are shocking. The embezzlement, lack of accountability. It stressed me. It stressed me, really. It's a challenge. There's this, for instance, plea bargaining. Those plea bargaining law, which is still there. People were giving money for their freedom. They are buying their freedom. But even those, the amount which they gave is not. Most of the amount is missing. No evidence, no records. It's nowhere to be seen. So it's a very big challenge, which I see. It also affects how selfish we are. Another thing which I would give as an example is the issue of medical insurance, for instance. You have this young, a child who has no medical insurance, and you had this first lady, the former first lady, or first, now we'll be having this a gentleman. First gentleman. And I think in Tanzania we are sure we'll have one. We have one. So we have this first lady or first gentleman who is paid pension for work which she or he didn't do. So the law has passed. So it's a challenge. And many children are dying because of that. I also want to address the issue of culture. I'm not an expert on culture, but what I know is that culture is a human right, the right to culture. And the culture to be accepted must be accepted by many, but also should not be harmful. Should not infringe others' rights. That is culture, according to our definition as human rights activists. Should not be harmful. Should be accepted. But culture evolves. It changes over time, and you can't force culture. You can't impose culture. You can't do that. That's according to my understanding. And lastly, on intellectuals, I think my call to intellectuals is to use your pen, to continue to use your pen, to write, but use us to make the noises, because Africans most of us are coming from an oral tradition. We listen more than reading. So you as human rights activists will amplify your words.
Okay. Shukran. I want to thank the panel. Can you clap for them again? So we've had poetry. People have told us about Animal Farm. But for me, the book that most resonated with me, of course, it has to be Chinua Achebe. No. Anthills of the Savannah. Anthills of the Savannah. Why? Because Achebe told us this story. You know, I think in all our cultures, because we've been talking about culture, in all our cultures, we have this eternal struggle between the lion and the hare. Right? So Achebe tells this story of one time, the lion had been looking for hare all over the jungle, all over the village, all over the mountain. Finally, in a very narrow path, lion meets hare. Lion meets hare. And lion says, "You, woman, I've been looking for you everywhere. This time now I've got you. Today, you're Kalas." You say Kalas? In Uganda we say Kalas. They say it's Kiswahili, but I don't know if is it? You don't think so, is it? Is it? Tell us, the kids, who are the... Is it? Kalas. Yeah? Today you're finished. So, hare says, "I'm finished." Okay. So, hare kicks up the dust, turns around there. Be. Lion says, "Hey, hello. Hare, what's wrong with you? Don't you know that I'm going to clear you tonight?" And hare says, "Okay, I know that. However, I want for those who passed along this path to say that a woman died here." That's the struggle theory of human rights. Bwana Kamata.
It's colors. Okay, it is Gioni, it is evening, and we have to allow ourselves to accept that it is the end of the day, end of our first day here, to give room for the second day. I know some of you will be walking and driving some a distance from here. So you need to get there early and relax a bit and solve some African problems later. Our Codestia group knows what is solving African problems after a meeting. Okay, I was listening and just to one or two things. Human rights, and I was looking at the ISA's chapters, and one of the issues he raises is the right to organize. And I was asking myself, when we were students in the late 80s, we were linked, we were concerned with things which were happening beyond our university as students. And the immediate was Nairobi. A lot of things were happening there. We'll gather in a lecture theater called ATB in the middle of the night. Students and staff will debate about Moi, and then we'll end up writing a petition and signing it. Okay, so when people are talking about Palestine, etc., and probably because these things are not in as we took them for granted in the past, petition writing and signing, releasing statements. I know Udasa used to release statements condemning this, etc. I learned how to write a statement. But if you are not doing this stuff, even the skills of doing them disappear. It's some cultures that are traditional to the universities, but not anymore. So if you're talking, for example, about a petition as a way of expressing some grievances or making some demands, there is a certain generation among ourselves, some staff and even students, who don't know anything about this. They don't know what's happening because now we have so many universities in Tanzania. Yeah, by then we had only one, so we were concerned about Nsukka. I came to know Nsukka University in Nigeria. I always remind people that something happened. I think it was Nsukka and Amina Hall. You know, so you also even imagine of Amina Hall. I've never been there, but I still remember something happened there, and we condemned it as students. Okay, so I was in a class last time, and I said, if you are not concerned with what is happening to your colleague sitting or sharing a table with you, you can't be concerned with Palestine. I don't know what. Okay? And why? Because when we started at this university, cost sharing was introduced. There was resistance. Students resisted. They were crushed. But they kept on resisting cost sharing. With time, they introduced a loan. Some students will get a loan, some will not. And those who didn't receive a loan will wage a struggle. And those who have received a loan will join with those who have not received a loan in the struggle to demand for a loan. Not anymore. Not by accident, because, and I think this is what we'll be discussing tomorrow and the day after, systematic approach of disorganizing students and staff. The right to organize. Is it a human right? Huh? Is it a human right? The right to think. But you can only think properly if the space for doing that is available. Can you translate your thinking into an organizational form? Those are the issues I think tomorrow. We have started well. We have had a very nice day. So many issues have come out. And I believe tomorrow and the day after, we are going to have a very engaging session. So I niswachukulia sana muda jamani. I just saying that I don't have to take much of your time, Isabel. Let me allow myself to shut up my mouth by saying that we have come to the end of this fruitful day one of our colloquium, and I wish you a very good and a relaxing evening. Asanteni sana.